Stay in the conversation. It has been a theme for Ravi Zacharias International Ministries. It's going to be what I'm doing all this week with Andy Bannister, Canadian director, lead apologist. And this is a key if we want to share our faith in a compelling way, Andy. And we can learn so much from you, from this marvelous apologetic ministry in keeping the conversation going and making an opportunity for the truth that is life-changing. You've taken us a step further with a brand new documentary. Congratulations.
Well, that's right. We're very excited, Moira. It launches on Sunday, the 5th of October, right here on this channel. Burning Questions is what we've called it, looking at 6 really important questions to do with faith and reason and why we can know the gospel is true. And so we're excited. It's a great opportunity.
We were talking just before we came to air here, and you were saying we need to learn to ask good questions. Jesus is our example.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason we called it Burning Questions and not Here Are the Answers, because I think, we believe as Christians, certainly I believe, that there are really good answers in Scripture, that there are good answers in the gospel. But I think sometimes Christians, we've given ourselves a reputation for being people who want to talk at folks and not actually listen. And when we learn to ask questions, I think even the most sometimes sort of scary, daunting, non-Christian in our lives, we can begin breaking down those barriers if we just learn to ask other people a question and do some listening. Jesus was the master of this in the Gospels. The number of times he asks a question before leaping in. I think there's something about that.
Now, I was trying to remember, and you've helped me. 2010, you came here. You hadn't actually moved here yet with your family. That was just kind of getting your feet wet, and you probably at that time told me your story, but I couldn't remember if you were a hard sell to the faith or just how you became not just convinced of the truths of Scripture, but a champion of them and a great salesman.
So I'm not sure if that's a compliment or not, or maybe it's the accent.
We're going to talk about that.
We will talk about that. Well, I was raised in a Christian home, Moira. My parents were still alive. They are lovely Christians. I was raised in a Christian home, went to church from a young age. I think gave my life to Christ about the age of 13 or 14 at a youth camp. And I remember actually growing up as a young Christian, sort of wishing I had a more dramatic testimony. I was conscious that you always had these big kind of evangelistic sort of services, and they'd wheel on the person who'd previously been a drug addict, granny murdering psychopath, and there was I raised in a Christian home, and I sometimes wondered, wouldn't it be more fun if it was more dramatic? But I think the interesting thing is this, where things got really real for me was in my mid-20s. I went along, it's a long story, but I went along to a place in London, England called Speaker's Corner. It's known as the kind of free speech capital of the world. It's a big tourist attraction. And at Speaker's Corner, anyone can stand on a ladder or a soapbox and talk about anything they want, religion, politics, sport, you name it.
And people gather around and listen to you?
Yeah, and in fact, in the summer, you get thousands of tourists come. It's been going for over 100 years, and it's a very, very famous part of London's Hyde Park. Well, a friend persuaded me to come and try my hand at street preaching, specifically preaching to Muslims. There were many Muslims at Speaker's Corner because they'd been using it as a platform as well. So that sort of autumnal afternoon in September 2007, I stepped up onto a stepladder and tried to share what I believed with about 300 Muslims. And to say they tore me to pieces is to flirt casually with understatement. They annihilated me. They threw questions, they threw objections. I got down from that ladder, my head spinning, and literally went home that day thinking, maybe I need to become a Muslim. They have all of the answers, all of the questions, I have nothing. And I lay awake that night tossing and turning, and about 3 in the morning, my long-suffering wife kind of elbowed me in the ribs and went, "Why are you tossing and turning and keeping us both awake?" And I shared my sad little story, and her sage advice was, "Why don't you read a book? Ideally in the morning." And so the following morning, I went and bought my first ever book on how to give a reason for what we believe as Christians, what we call apologetics.
You hadn't been to Bible school or really had a strong foundation.
Hadn't been to Bible school, hadn't been to university. In fact, no one in my family had been to university. I don't really come from an academic background. And so I read and I read and I read, got answers to their questions, went back the following week, and they had a whole set of new questions, and they made me look stupid all over again. But we repeated this little exercise for about 3 months. And I say now, actually, I'm very grateful for the way that God actually used Muslims, of all people, for me, to challenge everything that I believed, which caused me to dig deep and look for answers. And I discovered that there were, and that led on to an academic career and into what I do now. But I think for many Christians, we often sort of live our lives in a Christian bubble. We don't talk to those who don't share our convictions, be they Muslims or Hindus or atheists, and so we're actually never encouraged to do what Scripture tells us to do. 1 Peter 3:15 says, always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have. Well, I often think it's not until you have a conversation with someone who disagrees with you profoundly that you're forced to begin looking for those reasons. For me, it was Muslims.
And you have a real sensitivity, almost an affection for them, and a burden to share.
Yeah, very much so.
Now defend so well. Interestingly, raised in a Christian home wasn't an automatic belief in the existence of God under your roof. Your brothers.
Yeah, I've got a family who have gone different directions. My brother and sister have gone different directions, which is interesting because sometimes when I tell my story, you know, atheists particularly will look me in the eye and go, oh, you're only a Christian because you were raised in a Christian home, to which my siblings show that to be wrong. And also you can look them in the eye and say, well, tell me, were you raised in an atheist home? Yes, my parents were skeptics. Aha! So the only reason you're an atheist is because your mum and dad were. So, hey, touche.
Well, this project takes you face-to-face with some of the strongest opponents of the faith that you live.
Well, that's right. So for burning question,
your courage has grown leaps and bounds. Although, I have to say, not to be shamed and to retreat from what you believed, even though you didn't have a strong foundation, is commendable. Well, the opposition made you stronger.
Exactly. And I think the thing is this, you know, we have to ask ourselves the question, for those of us who are Christians, you know, why is it we're a Christian? Is it because it makes us feel good? Is it because of the way we were raised? Well, those are not good answers. Those are terribly bad answers, I'm afraid. There's only one reason to be a Christian, and that's if it's true. And so if it's not true, almost in a sense, I want to know, because then I can walk away and turn my back on it. C.S. Lewis, a name that many of us will know, you know, famously said, look, if Christianity is true, it is the most important news ever. If it's false, it is of no value at all. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important. It's either infinitely important or it's worthless. There's no middle ground. And the question is it true? And that's what I wanted to discover, and I hope that's what this TV documentary, Burning Questions, we're hoping to explore as well.
Well, let's look at a segment. And this is our first question, is regarding just the existence of God.
That's right, and the first question we explore in the TV show, and incidentally, if people want to find out more, burningquestions.ca is the website. The first episode, we come in right at ground level. Is there a God? And so we thought, before we turn to what Christianity says on this, we need to look at what, in a sense, the opposition, what the other side say. And so we were very fortunate. We managed to track down a guy called Peter Atkins, one of the world's leading atheists. He's at Oxford University in England, and he's a passionate, committed atheist. And so we put lots of questions to him, and I think in the clip we're about to watch, one of the questions I began by asking him is, look, Peter, before we even talk about if there is a God or if there isn't, we know where you stand. If there isn't a God, you know, why is it that religious belief is so widespread? So many people believe in God. As an atheist, why do you think that is? And that was the question I asked him.
Okay, watch for the back and forth. You're going to get the atheist and then the believer, and the atheist and the believer, and here we go.
Well, I think there are probably three reasons. One is the cultural conditioning that is all pervasive from cradle to coffin, and it's very difficult to break out of that particular constraint. I think religion is a great comfort because it gives you the promise, in certain religions anyway, of a second shot. Or indeed eternal bliss, and who's going to turn down eternal bliss, even in the absence of any evidence for it?
As science and as philosophy have developed, the classical proofs for the existence of God were introduced, and people might recognize those as arguments for God's existence based on reason, from looking at things like the order of the world, and things like causality. What was the first thing that caused everything to happen? And some people will call it the Big Bang, and others will call it God. And those developed into rational proofs, evidence for the existence of God. And people became disappointed when they didn't actually prove God's existence without doubt.
I'm highly skeptical about whether there's any kind of cosmic person back there. But that's not to say that I think I have a great answer to the question, why does the universe exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? Just because you don't know the answer to a question doesn't mean that you ought to consider all of the potential answers equally viable, equally good answers.
I think obviously people can make that claim and say, I feel totally fulfilled without God. And in one sense, out of all the arguments, that one is quite a subjective one. Having said that, however, it is interesting throughout literature, within the arts, and even when you read, the profiles of the super rich and famous, it does seem to be across the socioeconomic spectrum, across the genders, across the races, it does seem to be a universal question. Is there more to life than just physics and chemistry? Does my life have a meaning and purpose?
14 months. Okay, I'm just saying, how long to put this together? Travel as well.
That's right. So no, I was talking to a friend about this just last night, and we shot the first scenes for this in February last year, and that was actually in Oxford, where we talked to Peter Atkins, the atheist, and Stephen Law, the other atheist you saw in that clip. And I think what I like about that segment we've just seen, Moira, is I think hopefully part of the ethos of the show comes through. We talk to people of all faiths and none. So you've seen atheists on there. Also in the show, we talk to Muslims and Hindus, Buddhists, Jews. We want to make sure we do a really fair treatment of what other worldviews believe. Some are scholars, some are less scholarly, men and women, all over the world as well. We travelled Canada, literally from east to west. We filmed in the UK, filmed in the USA as well. So really try to give it quite a breadth. So hopefully that means every viewer, whether they're academic or non-academic, wherever you are, whether you're a doubter or a disciple, there will be something in Burning Questions that will grab you. So again, burningquestions.ca. Is the website. Trailers for all 6 episodes up there now, by the way.
Get a sneak peek.
Get a sneak peek.
Okay, I don't want to strike below the belt here, but have you seen the Jaguar commercial? Why do Brits get all the best parts?
It is the accent, isn't it?
Sir Ben Kingsley and others that you would recognize. Sometimes it sounds lofty.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just a bunch of gobbledygook. Would you agree?
I would, in a sense, and I bear that accent. And actually, it's a very important point you've made, Moira. If you look at some of the leading atheist voices today, someone like Richard Dawkins, hugely popular. Many people hear him and are convinced. One of the reasons they're convinced is he has the same accent as I do, and for some reason the British accent is considered intellectual.
And he articulates very well.
Yeah, and one of the things I always say to people, no matter how good the accent, no matter if it's accompanied by the clang of PhDs behind it, ask the question why. And the same with when people hear me. That goes for skeptics listening to me. I would want people to say, okay, what's Andy said? Is there substance to it? And we need to say the same when we hear Peter Atkins or Richard Dawkins, to go, okay, it sounds good, but is it true? Learn to ask the question, why?
Well, I'm loaded, and we're just going to have to wait because our time's up right now. But tomorrow, God and Science.
God and Science.
Oh, pick the easy ones, right?
Small questions, Moira, small questions.
Boy, they're burning. And we will be too, right here, same time, same channel tomorrow. Andy, thank you for giving us the time.
You're welcome, Moira. Good talking to you.
Love to pick at you.
Fantastic.